very, very sad day. We have to discuss a horrible tragedy, and that tragedy is 13 Reasons Why. Netflix recently released the fourth and final season of this garbage heap of a show, 13 Reasons Why. In some ways, this season actually improves a lot on the original 3 seasons of the series, but in most ways, this show is so much worse now. At this point, it honestly feels like the creators just stopped giving a shit about writing or integrity or being a cohesive story. They just want to make that money. Hell, this season isn't even 13 episodes anymore. They cut it down to 10. That's how much less of a shit they give. And even though this show is technically shorter, it was still the most painful to sit through, just from how awful it is. So what did I enjoy about this new season? What in particular stood out which made this season much worse? And how does this affect my overall opinion of the show? Well, let's find out. By the way, YouTube has been censoring a lot of commentary videos, especially regarding a lot of these tough topics, so expect me to be censoring some no-no words like fuck, cunt. Nothing worth mentioning, let's move on. Now, 13 Reasons Why is something I have discussed in detail in my past videos. However, to give context to what I'm about to talk about, I think it's fair that I go over the plots of each of the first 3 seasons before I talk about the plot of this season. Season 1. Clay Jensen is your typical teen soap opera protagonist who, after the death of his friend/love interest Hannah Baker via suicide, is listening to these tapes that she left behind detailing the individual reasons for why she committed suicide. In the meantime, the parents of Hannah Baker are threatening to sue the school on the presumptions that they knew what was going on with Hannah due to the bullying and such, and they didn't choose to stop it. In addition, all the kids who bullied the fuck out of Hannah Baker are terrified that they're gonna get in trouble. Also, one of the characters confesses to raping not only Hannah Baker but several other women in the school. Seems like we're off to a wonderful start. Season 2. In this season of the show, the Baker family proceeds to go to court in an attempt to sue the school for them knowing what was going on with Hannah Baker. In the meantime, a group of characters are trying to attack Clay and the rest of the cast in order to stop them from speaking up at the court. We also find out that there's a rape cult going on within the school, and that Hannah didn't include certain things on the tapes, creating more drama, adding on to what happened in the previous season. Throughout the season, Tyler is also being built up to become a school shooter, amongst other weird, stupid drama stuff that a bunch of other characters are getting into that I really just don't feel like mentioning. However, for some context for the whole Tyler thing, the reason that he chose to become a school shooter is because the character Monty, seen here, actually raped him in the bathroom. In addition, Clay starts seeing ghosts. Season 3. The guy who raped Hannah gets capped, Jessica starts a feminist league, Clay and every other character becomes an asshole, Ani, this new character, joins and she's annoying as fuck, and Tyler actually has a pretty good story. I haven't even talked about the season I'm supposed to be reviewing, and I'm already tired as fuck of the show. Season 4. In the 4th season of 13 Reasons Why, Clay is starting to deal with all the mental buildup he has from trying to protect all of his friends. To the point where Clay starts beginning using drugs, having nightmares, and just ruining his overall relationships with just people in general. In addition, the character Winston, who was a love interest to Monty in the 3rd season, comes to liberty to investigate the murder of Bryce, knowing that Monty was framed. Winston also gets help from a bunch of douchebag jocks who were friends with Monty, who also decide to antagonize Clay just to be dickheads, really. There's also a fuck ton of subplots that clog up the pacing and causing this season to feel very bloated. However, I will get to those later when I go into the individual characters. For now, I will just stick with the main plot. First, let's discuss Clay's fucking mental breakdown. Just as how mental illness was portrayed in the 1st season through Hannah Baker, Clay's depiction of mental illness and his depression and his anxiety is just a clusterfuck. Unlike the previous seasons, we do get to see more consequences for what Clay deals with, even if it's awful. Clay is still seeing dead people, but at a much higher rate. At this point, it's just way more fucking offensive. The show tries to have some horror movie aesthetic with the hallucinations Clay is enduring. However, it just kind of makes it come off as very more offensive, especially when the show is trying to pander to an audience that thinks it's helping them. He starts doing drugs, however, we never really see the effects that drugs have on him other than the fact that he spazzes like a crackhead. We also don't get to see the effects of drugs actually have on Clay for him to actually have a reason to take them to deal with his depression. We also get this weird revelation that Clay is actually having blackouts and doing just dumb shit. And by dumb shit, I mean blowing up a car, vandalizing the school, and just being a prick to his friends while completely unaware of his decisions. Although I will say this has been cleverly foreshadowed, it just comes off as offensive as fuck, especially when there is real no payoff or consequences for what Clay does. It comes off as even more offensive when we find out that all this mental suffering is derived from him not letting go of Hannah. This is the third time we've experienced his character arc with Clay, and at this point it's just very derivative. As far as Clay's inner struggle goes with not being able to save everything, that's a good premise. However, the show handles it so fucking poorly. The second I think this season is going to sit down and visually show us what Clay is going through, they fuck it up. It's the same reason why I can't stand these fucking ghost scenes. These ghost or hallucination characters don't obey any set of defined rules in the series, and they take away any bit of subtlety that the viewer can get. This element is fine in small doses, but Jesus fucking Christ, this season abused the living shit out of it. In addition, without taking into account the influences of what happens between other characters, Clay just kind of goes through some dumb shit. So like the school starts bringing like SWAT team people as like school officers, which is so detached from reality. I feel like I'm watching Adventure Time at that point. This show even takes it a step farther by having a school shooting scene only to have a revelation that it's all fake. There's racist cops now at Liberty because the show needed a way to start a conversation, and Clay kind of starts a fucking protest. Clay and everyone else also get upset because the parents meet up and make this app and put it on everyone's phone so they can track everyone. Even though if you get everyone a fucking iPhone, they can do that anyway. These subplots don't suffer from the same issues of the previous seasons to where they're all rushed. I mean, well, they do, but like that's not the biggest thing. The biggest thing with these subplots is that they're so stupid. There's also a subplot where like Clay feels that like he could do the same things that Bryce and Monty did, but that also goes nowhere like at all. Clay goes to this frat party and he thinks the girl's gonna get raped, but he ends up getting an erection after seeing her laying on the floor unconscious. It's mentioned a few times here and there later on in the season, but once again, there are no real true consequences that Clay has to deal with. He kind of just gets a slap on the wrist and that's it. There's also just some really stupid filler involving Clay. Like there's this dream sequence that Clay has that's clearly inspired by Terminator, where everyone's like in an apocalypse world, which clearly just exists to fill in time. Clay has sex with the daughter of the police chief in the previous season, and he ends up getting into a fight that he actually wins for the first time in the entire series. Clay and Ani break up, but nothing really interesting comes up of that. There's a lot more subplots that are really stupid that involve Clay. However, as I said earlier, I intend on getting to these plots later on in the video. But so let's get to the other main portion of the plot and start talking about Winston. No, not that one, there we go. Okay, so Winston gets kicked out of his private school and chooses to go to Liberty in order to act a private investigation for the murder of Bryce, just because kids can do that apparently. In addition to his private investigation, Winston teams up with the jocks who are bullying Clay as a means for help for his investigation. And by the way, by prank Clay, I mean actually psychologically torment this kid. The jocks for some reason think that Clay had something to do with the murder of Monty, even though it's revealed that he was stabbed in a prison cell by a fellow inmate. Like most things, this isn't really brought up later on in the series and doesn't amount to any major consequences for these characters. Anyway, back to this prick. My issue with this is that the introduction to Winston doesn't really add any nuance to the story. All the interactions that we get from Winston is basically the same from every other villain character that we've had throughout the entire series. Winston dating Alex is kind of unique considering that Alex is the one who killed Bryce. However, there's no nuance to this, not until the end of the series. Even when Alex reveals to Winston that he's the one that killed Bryce, there's no real payoff. There's nothing unique that happens. Winston just kind of doesn't care anymore. The scene where Winston lets go of Monty is pretty touching. However, this is all completely overshadowed when you realize that Winston only met Monty twice. They even bring this up as a means of dismissing the criticism. However, it's not at all valid. Like, can you tell me Monty's favorite color, Winston? No, alright, then shut up. But Kyle, it was established that he fell in love with Alex really quickly, so his love for Monty is completely justified. This is a really stupid argument I've heard, and here's why. Winston and Alex had a relationship that was established and built upon for seemingly weeks and probably even a month or two, at least within the timeline of the series. Winston and Monty met twice, and the first time resulted in Winston getting beat up. So not only are his motivations weak, he doesn't get any substance added to his character throughout the series to give him any flavor, any reason for me to like this character. Even after it was revealed that Winston and Monty were a couple, there are still no interesting interactions between Winston and the other jock characters that are supposed to be helping it. So basically, all the audience is really left with is really bad filler between both Winston's arc as well as Clay's personal character arc. Well, most of the series is filler, but what can you do? And speaking of filler, you probably heard me use the terms, "this didn't really amount to anything worthwhile," or "this didn't have any consequences" a lot when discussing a lot of these moments in the plot. A lot of the events that happen within the series don't carry any weight moving forward within the season. Diego has reason to believe that Jessica helped with the murder of Bryce. Oh nah, they're all just fine. Students start a riot and get into fights with police officers. Nah, everyone's fine. Everyone's alright to go to prom. Why are the writers so scared of giving any consequences for any of the actions for these characters in this goddamn series? And finally, another thing that bothers me so much in this season is that it keeps trying to enforce this narrative that everything within the series that is wrong is because of Bryce. Don't be wrong, Bryce is a terrible person, and the misdeeds that everyone else committed against Hannah do not compare at all to what Bryce did to Hannah. But the show is called 13 Reasons Why for a reason. It is more than just the acts of Bryce that contributed to all the terrible things that happened in the show. I've been very critical in the first season of 13 Reasons Why, but at least it set something up to be consistent with, while the rest of the series has not followed suit. And this season is especially clear. But Kyle, didn't you say you didn't like that Clay was still dealing with the ramifications of Hannah Baker? First off, I don't think there should have been more than one season. And secondly, a show doesn't need to have the same conflicts in order to have the same themes. I would have no problem with the series if at least it held some consistency. However, all it has done is just restate certain conflicts and reinforce the complete opposite of what was already established with the original themes. Holy crap, there's a lot of characters to talk about. I don't even know where to begin with this one. I actually don't have many problems with the way Zach is handled throughout this season. Zach becomes an alcoholic for the events that happened in the previous season with him assaulting Bryce, which led to his death. There's actually a lot of subtlety with this character arc, and this results in my opinion, the best scene in the entire season. But of course, in 13 Reasons Why old-fashioned, they add some dumb shit that kind of just drags down this character. Like, he's scared of hospitals, and because of that, he doesn't want to see Justin when he's dying. But then he's just like, oh, I'm not scared anymore, and he goes to the hospital. Also, his relationship with Clay is inconsistent as fuck. Sometimes they're friends, sometimes he just fucking hates Clay, and it makes no sense. The show goes out of its way to show why Zach would not like Clay, but he just keeps going back to him for some reason. I really just don't understand why. In addition to all of this, the actor who plays Zach also has the worst performance issues, but we'll talk about that later. Alex is gay now, or bi. They're not really clear if he still likes women. Other than Clay, Alex seems to have like a lot of issues when it comes to relationships, especially romantic ones, so it doesn't really feel like it came out of nowhere. However, one of the issues I have with this though is that Alex describes this ordeal as a conflict when we don't really see much of a conflict. Having Alex simply being gay and coming out of the closet and just like existing as a gay person within the series is fine enough. Call Me By Your Name does this very concept and it's amazing at it. Who knows, maybe I'm just very ignorant to this kind of stuff since I'm not gay. However, from a viewer's perspective, it does feel like that the show is trying to make you feel as if Alex is overcoming something when we don't really see that. Editor's note, my whole point in this segment is to say that we're never really established any of the frustrations that Alex goes through while being in the closet. Meanwhile, it feels that the show is trying to push some narrative that there is one. I do think it's sweet though that there is this accepting tone with Alex being gay throughout the series. However, I just don't understand why it was treated as if there was a problem. It's just a show don't tell rule that the series just doesn't seem to follow, but once again, we'll talk about the acting later. Alex being the murderer of Bryce also runs into conflict with Winston because Winston actually loved Alex. However, this is handled terribly and there isn't a satisfying conclusion with any of this. I guess you could argue that Winston is the reason why Alex began accepting himself. However, this conflict is not at all explored within Alex's psyche, which is why I'm so dissatisfied with this. I also find it very ironic that Zach takes it a lot harder than Alex on killing Bryce, even though Alex is actually the one that made the final blow and not Zach. Don't get me wrong, Alex does have individual conflict about this, but not nearly to the extent that Zach and Jess do. Another side note, why are all the gay people bad people? I mean, Tony's pretty cool, and I guess Charlie, but he doesn't really have a character. But everyone else is either a murderer, a rapist, or just a really shitty friend. Winston isn't a bad character as far as morality goes, but he's also kind of really stupid. There's also Justin, but they never clarify if he's bi or not. All we know is that he let men fuck him for drug money. I don't know, Mr. Yorkey, you just trying to tell us something here? Okay, I feel like I spent way too much time on this point. Let's move on. I really hate this character, and she's honestly one of the hardest parts to get through when it came to watching the show. Jessica goes from leading this feminist movement within high school to basically needing all male attention. Justin breaks up with Jessica in order to help with his addiction problems, and in response, Jessica just starts sleeping with Diego. For some context, Diego is one of the main people who has been antagonizing Clay, and is also trying to help Winston find out who the killer of Bryce is. She's just doing this to be a bitch. There's no real actual reasoning for this. And of course, Jessica is still dealing with her trauma with Bryce, but of course they had to use Ghost Bryce for this, and you guys know how much I like that.
He's one with the nature.
Most of her issues with Bryce are still derived from what Bryce did to her, not from her actually murdering him, but whatever, I guess. I'm not trying to say that there isn't anything for Jessica to overcome, but the show does not focus on it the way it should. Instead, we get the stupid Diego filler that just clogs up Jessica's story. Tyler doesn't really do a lot this season, but then again, there isn't really a lot for him to do. Tyler ends up becoming a police informant for the purchases of illegal guns and helps actually locking a lot of people up. However, his friends think he's going to shoot up the school again, so it causes a lot of problems. The mistrust is mainly derived from the fact that Tony and Clay learned that Tyler is becoming more involved with the police, but Tyler is never clear with what his involvement is doing. The show just seems to forget a lot about Tyler too. Remember how Tyler was a boxer in season 3 alongside with Alex? No? Well, apparently Brian Yorkey didn't remember either. There's also a conflict between Tyler and Winston when Tyler finds out that Winston was dating Monty, the guy that raped him. These conflicts don't exactly go anywhere or amount to anything interesting at least. Tyler also starts dating Monty's sister, the guy who raped him, which I mean...
Okay.
Ani does absolutely nothing this season. Let's move on. Other than his conflict with Tyler, Tony doesn't really do anything else that's relevant to the story. He becomes a pro boxer and ends up getting into college. However, it really doesn't feel like there's enough room for this character in the story. It's a shame because Tony's probably the most likable character within the show. However, he doesn't really get enough room to grow, and everything that happens with him feels so insignificant. The only issue I have with this character is that his growth within this show does feel incredibly forced and unnatural, but whatever. We don't spend nearly as much time with Tony as we do the rest of the cast, and that's probably why his arc feels so inorganic. If there is one character that represents the lack of planning that went through this entire series, it is Justin. In the first season, Justin was basically like a regular jock kid, except he had pretty bad parents, and his main conflict was that he let his best friend rape his girlfriend. In the second season, he ran away and became a heroin addict, but returns in order to help put the guy Bryce, who raped his girlfriend, away in jail. As much as I find this overdramatic and in need of full focus for an entire series or a movie, it is pretty consistent. In the third season, not only do we find out that he's still selling drugs now for his old stepdad, but he was also molested as a child. In the fourth season, we find out that not only is Justin still using drugs after multiple times where he was supposed to be getting better, but he also gets full-blown AIDS and dies. I do like that Justin as a character has grown a lot, at least in personality-wise. However, for what they give him to do, it's just so out of nowhere. Now, admittedly speaking, they do reveal that Justin did have sex with men while he was homeless within the season. However, having sex with men doesn't mean you get full-blown AIDS. I'll talk about the AIDS thing first because this one's really bad. This is something that could have been foreshadowed much earlier within the series. I honestly don't understand why this was not brought up at all in the third season, when Justin didn't really accomplish anything for his character in that season. Everything from Justin literally dropping to the effects of AIDS, to him getting diagnosed with AIDS in the hospital, to him dying feels very, very rushed. This is also likely due to the fact of the timing of how this is all implemented in the story, but that's a topic for later. So for now, let's just talk about Justin's addiction and why it's really bad. Justin's lack of progression with his drug use makes it feel as if it's a waste of time. The show doesn't really go in depth with a justification of why Justin decides to go back into drugs, and it's also very repetitive with how he does it. It is revealed that Justin's mom passed away, however, we don't really get to see the mental effect it had on him that would lead him to do drugs again. Listen, I understand that drug abuse is way more complicated than just overcoming it and just not doing it again. However, the way this show presents drug addiction and drug abuse is in the most simple form possible. And there are shows out there that handle themes of addiction so much better than this. Lick Gallagher is a character from the series Shameless who deals with alcohol addiction the same way that Justin deals with heroin. However, the differences between Lip and Shameless and Justin in 13 Reasons Why is that Shameless takes its time to develop each and every intricate reason of why Lip would be going through alcoholism and experiencing these emotions. So when we see Lip progress and eventually overcome his addiction, it's so much more satisfying in Shameless than whatever the hell Justin goes through in 13 Reasons Why. Listen, I understand that there are flaws with Shameless, especially when it comes to handling these themes, but 13 Reasons Why doesn't even meet the basic mark when it comes to dealing with these themes of alcohol, addiction, and drug abuse. However, the handlement of not only Justin's character, but every other character in this series has led to this series to feel clustered and unorganized. This bloatedness of the series is much thanks to this overwhelming amount of characters. As much as I would like to talk about all of them, there's just way too much to talk about, and a lot of them come with the same issue. When handling such topics such as STDs, mental illness, homosexuality, and drug abuse, it's best to keep a focus on these individual topics, or else you get something like 13 Reasons Why, which is a complete shit show with its story. If you're interested in topics like these, I recommend films such as Philadelphia, Trainspotting, and Moonlight. And as far as TV alternatives, I recommend the show Mr. Robot. Editor's note, if you do find this show to be very helpful and relatable, all power to you, and I'm not trying to take that away from you. However, this show does have a history by portraying the wrong messages to a lot of people who need help with these issues. Also, I don't think homosexuality is a mental illness. Just wanted to make that clear. Also, if you thought I was associating a lot of the themes that are represented in the show with the characters, that's because most of these characters are defined by the themes that they represent. Many of these characters do not have any defining features other than the problems that they themselves have to go through, and the ones that do are not at all explored. If you can tell me any unique quality trait of Alex that has nothing to do with his romantic issues or his mental illness, I will be shocked. Also, I want to talk about what happened to some of these other characters that were important in the series. What happened to some of the side characters that were introduced in Season 2 and 3? What happened to characters like Sherry, who played a very prominent role in both Season 1 and Season 2? Or characters like Marcus, who were close to Bryce but also ended up turning on him? Multiple characters who were important in the first 2 seasons do end up returning, so where are these characters? Guess we'll never know. Yeah, remember when I said that Justin dealing with HIV and AIDS took a very short amount of time? Yeah, it was less than 1 episode. From the moment Justin falls on the prom floor confirming he has HIV to the point to where he dies in the hospital is under about 45 minutes. Keep in mind, I also didn't take out any of the filler that happened in between these events, so really we have only about a half hour worth of screen time involving Justin's illness. Another rushed sequence of events is the riot sequence. Diego and Justin get into a fight, and Diego becomes a victim of racial policing. Students then proceed to walk out of the school as a means of protesting, not just the racist police, but other dumb bullshit that's been going on in the school. Then police and riot gear end up showing up to break down the fucking protests. I also think the police are supposed to be beating up the protesters, but I'm not sure because the acting's really, really bad. It's also revealed to Diego, who has been trying to find out the person who killed Bryce, that Jessica is part of the people who did it. Some more dumb shit gets revealed, and then Clay blows up a car. This sequence of events in its entirety happened in about 35 minutes, give or take. Seriously, I counted. Do you guys not see the problem with this? Everything feels so fucking cluttered. None of the major events I just listed off, or even throughout the entire series, feel like they have enough room to breathe. Sloppy editing is definitely at fault here, especially when it feels like scenes are actually missing throughout the duration of the series. Like, how did this freaking SWAT team get here? And how did Diego get out of his handcuffs? Dumb shit like this bothers me so much, especially when knowing that the creators of this show made the conscious decision to make this season 10 episodes rather than 13. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy that there's less 13 Reasons Why for me to talk about, but these 3 non-existent episodes could have been used to discuss or further develop a lot of these topics. If they really want to cut the season down to 10 episodes, why did they include all this stupid filler? But nah, we need room for Tyler to date Monty's sister. We also need more ghost people. Yeah, that's the solution. For everyone who's making a television show or a film in the future, little heads up, stop using this fucking edit. This edit when people try to use to show a panic attack where it takes up to the first person and there's a lot of cuts for no reason, and I see it everywhere. Why? Get creative. Here, I'll show you another creative panic attack right here. The writing and dialogue within this series is just as bad as ever.
And it's not just them, it's all of us. Yeah. Presumed guilty, no charge, no due process.
It's clear that old white man Brian Yorkey does not understand how children talk, especially in this day and age. Now, there is some good dialogue in this season, particularly the scenes between Clay and his therapist. However, this is not at all representative of the entire season. It feels like the writers are trying really hard to write this deep and complex drama, but are also trying to dumb it down for teenagers, and this just messes up the entire writing process. Whenever some of these characters speak, I honestly just want to throw up. It's so bad.
Who wants it, huh? Come on! Hey, come on! Hey, what the hell is going on? I will end you.
It would almost be safe to say that 13 Reasons Why has some of the worst writing in all of teen television. However, Riverdale is still a thing that exists, so I guess it kind of gets a pass.
Betty and I come as a matching set. You want one, you take us both. You wanted fire? Sorry, Cheryl Bombshell. My specialty's ice.
Dad, I'm scared. Get the phone. Call 911.
I touched on though, there's a lot of themes and events that feel very rushed in the show, and I blamed a lot of that on the editing, which don't get me wrong, it is. But the writing takes a massive toll on this, even more so than the editing. And of course, narration also makes a major comeback within this series, because what is 13 Reasons Why without dumb, useless narration? For something that hails itself for how important it is for society, for how many conversations it has started around mental health, 13 Reasons Why is very sloppy with its approach towards a lot of these things. Now let's talk about the acting. The acting in the show is the worst it's been ever. Every actor in the show seems to care less, even the ones who didn't really care that much before. Instead of just bitching and complaining about the acting, I'm just going to show you guys how terrible it is. I also added some music for the kiddies. I hope you all enjoy.
Then I'm going to try to save them. And if this is the day that I die, then I die standing up.
Are you sorry you did it?
More than I can ever say.
You're late.
I know.
And are you drunk?
Yeah? So? You don't own me, Aaron.
What the What is this? Hey man, back off. Who the fuck are you?
You're the guy I just had sex with.
We boys aren't here to party. Okay?
Well, hey, that's a single-barrel, small-batch Corliss. Fucking bourbon, guys. You can't even tell the difference.
Some of the stuff could just be bad dialogue from the writing, but I think the acting also deserves some blame in this too. This is also not helped by the fact that these actors who are playing high schoolers look like they're in their mid-30s. Regardless, I rest my case on the acting. Fuck this show. 13 Reasons Why is an exhausting and terrible experience, and the 4th season captures every single flaw from the previous seasons. Not only does the final season further implement all the previous problems that plague this series, but it also chooses to add its own at the detriment for the series. At its best, this show is just junk food teen drama that takes itself way too seriously. And at its worst, the show is an offensive piece of garbage that is more damaging than helpful than those it pretends to help. As much as I hate this show, one thing I can be grateful for in its conclusion is that the fact that it did end. With the ending of the show, I can finally take all this anger and aggression I've had toward the show and just let go of it. And now, I'm finally gonna do just that.
Okay,
okay? Maybe I'm not a good guy, maybe I shouldn't have tried. You told me that and I'm wondering why did I waste my own time? You got my hopes up, yeah you did, with intentions so malevolent. You really can play the biggest tricks, that's how it is, I don't question it, yeah. I'm sorry if I did any wrong, that's why I'm writing this song. Release my emotions through music, that's how I've coped all along. I don't want our friendship to end. We were going perfectly strong, that's true.